All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our final unit, the theory of evolution. Now, what I want you to keep in mind is that the reason we don't just call this unit evolution, but rather we call it the theory of evolution, is because evolution is still a theory. There's a large body of evidence, and we'll provide many examples throughout this unit of that evidence to support evolution, but it's not something we can be absolutely sure has always worked the way it does and works everywhere in the universe all the time. So, the man himself, Charles Darwin. The classical image you see on the right is Darwin clearly as an old man, but he started and compiled most of his data and did most of his field research as a younger man. He's considered the father of evolution. However, he did not discover evolution. In Darwin's day, before him, the concept of evolution was already developed. It was in its infancy. And what we really didn't understand was how it worked. We knew that evolution meant living things, species, change over time. But we had no idea how or why. And there were several ideas ranging from species could force themselves to evolve. Evolution happened via sexual reproduction. These would all be proven wrong by Charles Darwin. Now, when Darwin was a younger man, he didn't care for school very much. He, in fact, attended medical school, but during one of his early classes found out that he was very squeamish to the point of passing out at the sight of blood. So that wasn't going to work out for him. And then he tried his hand at religion, at becoming a man of the cloth. And that also did not pan out. So eventually, he took his love for nature and became a naturalist, which is just a scientist that studies nature. He had studied nature and collected natural objects, rocks, insects, things of that nature his entire life. The Galapagos Islands, located just off the western coast of South America, right here, is where Darwin would make some of his most important discoveries via observations. And the reason for this is because the Galapagos Islands are a grouping of islands fairly close to each other, but they are divided by enough ocean water that species are isolated on each of the islands. Therefore, they cannot interact with each other, and each of the islands actually has a relatively different environment on it. Now, he would observe several species of finches, which are a type of bird, turtles, specifically tortoises, and that he found unusual. And he would compare the island's plants and animals to the mainland of South America. This would allow him to see any differences. And it should also be noted that the Galapagos Islands, even today, contain species that are not found anywhere else on Earth. Now, Darwin, when he was making all these observations, as he traveled the world for about 5 years on a ship, as the ship's naturalist, the scientists to study nature, collect samples, make observations, and bring them back to England, where Darwin was from, he would write a book. And that book would summarize all of these observations, and he would conclude in that book that all species would have a common ancestor. Okay, so that you could take every species today, every one of us, humans to the most simplest bacteria, and trace both of us back to the same common ancestor, the beginning of life itself. And he would call this book The Origin of Species. And in this book is where we would see the first ever tree of life drawing that Darwin did himself. Now, during Darwin's travels as a ship's naturalist and all the observations he was able to make, Darwin would begin to define terms. He would define fitness as an organism's ability to survive and reproduce. That last part is important. It's all well and good if a species can survive in its environment, but the true goal of any species is to, or any individual within a species, is to help the species, and the best thing we can do for a species is to make more of us. Now, reproductive success meant having healthy offspring that were also able to survive and reproduce. This passes on DNA to future generations. This passes on good genes, genes that are suited for that environment, on to the next generation. And this definition of fitness would be woven into the famous term used all over society these days called survival of the fittest. Okay, so we have these two ducks pictured to the right. Which one of these two do you think would be most likely to find a mate? And you can go ahead and pick now. Hopefully you pick the one on the left. The bright colors of that duck are going to make it stand out amongst its other brethren, like the one to the right. Now, this might be a male and female of perhaps the same species. I'm not sure. They don't look like the same species. I would suggest they aren't. But oftentimes, when it comes to ducks or birds, the males are often extremely colorful, and that's an adaptation, a mutation that's benefited them to find a mate and pass on their genes to the next generation. Now, there's this idea of descent with modification in evolution. And Darwin's idea that species change over time and give rise to new species and share a common ancestor. So as one species begins, as reproduction occurs over and over and over, small changes occur. And we know these changes now to be mutations in DNA. And these changes can sometimes be so drastic that they give rise to a new species entirely, which we see happening here in some of these drawings taken from Darwin's notebook of different types of finches with different beaks, all coming from the same common ancestral finch, but over time, mutations and the environment, most likely, because it's their beak, most likely their food source, has selected which beak is the best for this finch in their given environment. I would like you to click on this link right here and just read through this descent with modification, all right, and follow the steps that this offers to you. Please, 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 please. Catch you in the next one, folks.